The Latin kings of Alba Longa, also referred to as the Latin kings of Rome, or Alban kings of Rome, are a series of legendary kings of Latium ruling mainly from Alba Longa. In the mythic tradition of the founding of Rome, they fill the 400-year gap between the settlement of Aeneas in Italy and the establishing of the city walls of Rome by Romulus and Remus. It was this line of descent to which the Julii claimed kinship. After the defeat and destruction of Alba Longa and the incorporation of Latium into the Roman state, the Alban kingship is succeeded by the series of kings usually called Etruscan, though only a few members of this line were brought in from neighboring Etruria to reign. Background: in Roman mythology, the Latin kingdom of Alba Longa was an ancient monarchy located in the present-day region of Latium in Italy. It was founded by King Ascanius as a colony to reduce crowding in Lavinium and later chosen to be the capital of his Latin kingdom. It incorporated the former capitals, Lavinium and Laurentum, with Lavinium as the second capital, and Laurentum the original. Archaeology has confirmed that Rome was founded as a colony of people from Alba Longa, although Rome was a kingdom in its own right. According to legend, after the fall of Troy, the Trojan prince Aeneas led a band of refugees in search of a new home, eventually arriving in Italy near Lanuvium. The traditional date of the war was established by Eratosthenes as 1184 BC, leaving a gap of some 4 centuries until the traditional founding of Rome in 753 BC. The genealogy of the Alban kings justified the close ties between Rome and its Latin communities, and enhanced the status of Latin families who could claim descent from a legendary ancestor. Such was the eagerness to claim a Trojan pedigree in the late Republic that 15 different lists of the Alban kings from Aeneas to Romulus survive. Ascanius, also known as Iulus, was the legendary founder of Alba Longa. His successor was Sylvius, his half-brother and the son of Aeneas and Lavinia, and the grandson of Latinus. They never ruled from Alba Longa but resided in Lavinium, although the exact location of Alba Longa remains difficult to prove. There is archaeological evidence of Iron Age settlements in the area traditionally identified as the site. History: King of the Aborigines Latinus was the 4th king of the Aborigines at the time Aeneas and his Trojans landed on the shore of Latium. The 3rd king of the Aborigines was Latinus, a maternal grandfather, Faunus. The 2nd king was Jupiter and the 1st is supposed to have been Saturnus, whose reign was a sort of golden age for the Aborigines. Other sources include any of Janus, Evander, Faunus, or Picus as kings of the Aborigines. After Aeneas arrived, he married Latinus' daughter, Lavinia, and joined Latinus in war against the Rutulians. Later in the war, Latinus dies, making Aeneas sole ruler of both the Trojans and the Aborigines. The two groups would assume the common name of Latini, or Latins. Aeneas soon dies in battle, leaving his son, Ascanius, as king of the Latins. Ascanius founds the city of Alba Longa, becoming the first Latin king of Alba Longa. House Sylvia. The Sylvian dynasty begins with Ascanius, but it's his younger half-brother Sylvius who succeeds him and whose name is lent to the royal bloodline. The descendants of Sylvius held sovereignty in Alba Longa at least until the death of Numitor, grandfather of the mythological twins, Romulus and Remus. Ancient sources agree that after the death of Numitor, Romulus refused to succeed him as king of Alba Longa, and instead handed sovereignty to the people of Alba Longa, who would elect an annual magistrate to rule Alba Longa. While this is doubtful, Romulus, as a member of the royal family, would have had the power to appoint magistrates in Alba Longa. Those magistrates must have shared a role similar to that of a Roman dictator or praetor. List of Latin kings. The following uses information from Livian Dionysius of Halicarnassus, who is the source for the length of each reign. Development and evolution. Regarding the legends linking Rome to Troy, those associating Rome with the survivors of the Trojan War were conceived by Greek writers and intellectuals. They generated what would later become the canonical tradition of Rome's beginnings. The legend has the city derived from a settlement of Trojan refugees, referred to by some writers as Little Troy. The progeny of Aeneas eventually carried out their destiny, the founding of Rome, via the cities of Lavinium and Alba Longa. However, this version took quite a long time before attaining canonical status and had some strong competition along the way. The earliest Hellenic explanations actually had the Greeks themselves, not Trojans, as the ancestors of Rome. Greek beginnings. The concluding lines of Hesiod's Theogony register the offspring of Odysseus and Circe, Agrius and Latinus, future rulers over the Tyrrhenians. Those lines reveal an early Hellenic interest in central Italy, and the introduction of those lands into the Greek legendary complex. More significant, Odysseus is made the ultimate ancestor of rulers in the region. Heraclides Ponticus, a pupil of Plato writing in the mid-4th century BC, referred to Rome as simply a Greek city. Aristotle himself endorsed a version that had Achaean, not Trojan, warriors driven by storm to Italy while trying to return home after the fall of Troy. The warriors were stranded and had to remain in Italy with captive Trojan women. They took up permanent residence at a site Aristotle called Latinum. Etruscan adaptation. The Etruscans in southern Etruria were interested in the myth of Aeneas and Anchises from at least the last 2 decades of the 6th century BC. Possibly in accordance with Hesiod, they originally considered the Greek Odysseus to be their founder hero, but later named Aeneas their founder due to tensions that increased their perception of the Greeks as enemies rather than partners in trade. The Latins were later invaded and ruled by southern Etruscan cities, and they too adopted Aeneas as a direct result of the invasion. Roman continuation. Fabius Pictor, the first Roman historian, composed his work near the end of the 3rd century BC. He embraced the tale of Aeneas as forefather of Rome, or at least the version of the tale that has his son Ascanius found Alba Longa. Pictor conveyed a history of continuous Greek exports to Italy, such as the story of Heracles landing in Italy, the Arcadian Evander establishing a colony on the Palatine Hill and introducing the alphabet. In short, the Roman historian did not hesitate to link the Roman origins with Greek legends. Cato the Elder was the first historian in Rome to compose his history in Latin, breaking with the traditions of Greek historiography. The surviving fragments of his Origines include all the figures introduced earlier and even claimed the Aborigines were, in fact, Greek. He even perpetuated a tradition in which Romulus adopted the Aeolic tongue from Evander. Later influence. In the Iliad, the god Poseidon prophesied that the descendants of Aeneas would survive the Trojan War and rule their people forever, but also that the rule of the Aeneadae would never happen in Troy. Virgil provided the imperial legacy of the Aeneadae by making Iülus the divine ancestor of Augustus in the Aeneid. From this divine connection the line of Aeneas stretched through Romulus, Augustus, and the Julio-Claudian emperors down to Nero. The Juliate was popular in the late Roman Republic for the more distinguished families to claim divine origin, and it was believed that Iülus was the mythical ancestor of the gens Julia. A notable member of the family, Julius Caesar, is said to have gone to Mount Alba to preside over the Ferii Latini. In doing so he confused the Roman people who hailed him as king upon his return to Rome, a title he rejected. While it is doubtful that the gens Julia were descendants of Iülus, it is believed that they are of all-born origin. In the Forum of Augustus, statues of the kings of Alba Longa and members of the Julian family were placed with Aeneas in the northwest hemicycle. In that hemicycle were the statues of Aeneas, the kings of Alba Longa, and M. Claudius Marcellus, Julius Caesar Strabo, and Julius Caesar among others. The northeast hemicycle had some Evira placed with Romulus. Augustus. A funerary procession reflects the same kind of propaganda as his Hall of Heroes, and included many of the same statues, with one headed by Aeneas and the other by Romulus. In propagating his apotheosis, Augustus chose to include his adoptive father Julius Caesar, who had recently achieved divinity himself, whereas Aeneas and Romulus are included for their divinity was well established. Roman mythology kings of Alba Longa would have claimed to be descendants of Jupiter, as Virgil demonstrates in the Aeneid. He represents the Alban kings as being crowned with a civic oak leaf crown. The Roman kings then adopted the crown, becoming personifications of Jupiter on earth. Latinus was thought to have become Jupiter Latius after vanishing during a battle with Mezentius. So too, Aeneas disappeared from a battle with Mezentius or with Turnus, and became Jupiter Indiges. Romulus became Quirinus, the oak god, when he was called up to heaven. Medieval Europe. Geoffrey of Monmouth, a Benedictine monk living in the 12th century AD, wrote a fabricated history of the kings of Britain. In this history, Britain is said to receive its name from Brutus, the first of its kings. According to him, Brutus was the son of Sylvius and the grandson of Aeneas. While on a hunting trip with his father, he accidentally shoots him and so flees Italy. First, Brutus goes to Greece and gathers Trojan companions who join him on his journey to Britain, where he takes the island from a race of giants. Benoit de Saint-Maury names Charlemagne as a descendant of the mythical Francus, thus linking the Plantagenet family to Aeneas. Francus, like Aeneas, survived the destruction of Troy and traveled to find a new home. He installed a territory with other Trojans comprising the entire Rhine and the Danube and founded a powerful village named Sicambre. Historicity. The ancient historian Dionysius of Halicarnassus is believed to have invented the Alban chronology to fill the gap of centuries between the fall of Troy and the founding of Rome. This could have been achieved by him taking the Roman history as it was, comparing it with the Greek, and inserting Greek Olympiads or Athenian archons. This method would have made the Greek histories seem contemporary with the people and events in the Roman history of his time. The names of the kings are often based on places around Rome, such as Tiberinus, Aventinus, Alba, and Capitus. Others are rationalizations of mythical figures, or pure inventions to provide notable ancestors for status-seeking families. In the Aeneid, Virgil invents characters into living beings not unlike the heroes of Homer. The events described toward the end of the Aeneid were a nationalistic interpretation of perceived historical events in Roman history. However, despite being a later invention, the Sylvian house or gens Sylvia likely did exist in literature. In Dante's Paradiso, Canto V, the soul of Byzantine Emperor Justinian I describes a brief history of the Romans to Dante. He begins with Aeneas arriving in Italy and avenging the death of Pallas. Justinian claims Alba Longa held the imperial eagle for 3 centuries until its defeat by Rome following the duel between the 3 Horatii and the 3 Curiatii. In the Nuremberg Chronicle, the kings of Alba Longa are listed as according to Livy, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, and Ovid. They are used in comparison to date the time in which various biblical figures were alive. In Historia Regum Britanniae, the reigns of several kings of Alba Longa are used to provide context for many biblical events and the lifetimes of historical persons. Links the early kings of Britain to the House of Silvius. Family tree. Inscriptions. Elogium of Aeneas. Elogia of some of the kings have been found. Kilvi 40,932, Kilvi 40,933, Kilvi 40,934, Kilvi 40,935, and Kilvi 40,936. An elogium at Pompeii in which Aeneas has the title Indiges Pater.